3 months after Sanctuary, Ambassador Elena Vasquez returned to the Grand Convocation Hall. The last time she had been here, species had moved away from her. Now they stood as she entered. The chamber had changed. Human tactical doctrine had been shared with every allied military. The biological weapons developed by Dr. Webb and Dr. Amara Okonkwo were being mass-produced. The Ravagers were still fighting, but they were in retreat. Momentum had shifted, but the cost haunted everyone. Empty seats in the human section. Names added to memorial walls every day. Earth had given everything and received only gratitude and grief in return. High Counselor Tarnvel called the emergency session to order. His voice was heavy. We gather today to vote on humanity's petition for full council membership. Before we begin, I ask for testimonials. Who wishes to speak? The line of speakers stretched around the chamber. It took 4 hours to hear them all. Frala spoke for the Kashari. She was no longer just a teacher. She was now a representative, chosen because she had fought alongside the humans. I watched them die for my people, she said simply. I watched them give everything to protect strangers. 20 billion of my species are alive because 37,000 humans decided our lives mattered more than theirs. If we deny them membership after this, we are not worthy of calling ourselves civilized. A Vryn soldier who had fought at Tertius 7 spoke. I thought humans were primitive because they fought with their bodies instead of drones. Now I understand. They fight with their bodies because they fight with their hearts. They cannot send machines to die for causes they believe in. They go themselves. That is not primitive. That is brave. Even some Quarren spoke in favor, though their species had opposed humanity from the beginning. We called them too violent, a Quarren admiral admitted. We were right. They are violent. But they direct that violence at threats, not at the innocent. They are dangerous to enemies. They are loyal to friends. That is exactly the kind of ally we need. Ixthari presented her compiled footage. The chamber watched in silence as humans fought, died, laughed, cried, and sacrificed. The footage ended with Sergeant Okonkwo's final stand. He had held a position alone for 2 hours so his squad could complete their mission. The last thing his helmet camera recorded was him saying, "Tell my sister I love her. Tell her it mattered." When the footage ended, there was absolute silence. Then Counselor Zixthar of the Vryn stood. We brought humanity into this war because we needed warriors. We got warriors. But we also got teachers, healers, engineers, and friends. We got a species that showed us what it truly means to protect others. I vote yes for their membership. And I will personally ensure that every Vryn child learns about humanity's sacrifice. The debate lasted another hour. Some still argued against membership. The Quarren Prime Minister stood firm. They are too unpredictable, too emotional, too dangerous. Tarnvel responded with quiet authority. Every species you have called unpredictable has enriched our civilization. The humans are emotional, yes. They feel deeply. They love fiercely. They mourn genuinely. Perhaps we could learn from that instead of fearing it. The vote was called. 731 in favor. 104 against. 12 abstaining. Humanity was accepted as the 848th species of the Galactic Council. Elena stood to give her acceptance speech. She had prepared something grand, something political. Instead, she spoke from her heart. We accept this honor, but we do so with heavy hearts. 37,000 of our people paid for this membership with their lives. We name them now, all of them, so you remember what this cost. She began reading names. It took 40 minutes. Every single name of every human who died at Sanctuary. The council sat in respectful silence and listened to everyone. These were not just soldiers, Elena concluded. They were people. They had families. They had dreams. They gave all of that up because you needed help. Because strangers were in danger. Because it was right. We accept membership, but we do it in their memory. And we promise that humanity will always answer when the galaxy calls. The council rose in a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. The celebration was muted. Earth mourned even as it rejoiced. Victory parades were held, but they were somber affairs. Heroes came home to empty houses. Families received medals for loved ones who would never hold them. Colonel Sarah Chen attended 63 funerals in 1 month. She stood in dress uniform and saluted as flag-draped coffins were lowered into the ground. She met families and tried to explain how their children, siblings, parents had died bravely. The words felt hollow every time. At Sergeant Okonkwo's funeral, she stood with Dr. Amara Okonkwo. The scientist had barely spoken since learning of her brother's death. He believed it mattered. Sarah said quietly. He was right. 20 billion people are alive because of him. I know, Amara replied. That does not make it hurt less. No, it does not. But it means he did not die for nothing. That has to be enough. The monument on Sanctuary became a pilgrimage site. Species from across the galaxy came to see it, to read the names, to understand what humanity had done, but humanity did not stop. They could not. The war continued. Human culture began spreading through the galaxy, not through force but through simple contact. Other species discovered human music and found it moving in ways their own art was not. They read human literature and found stories about struggle, hope, and triumph that resonated with them. A Kashari philosopher wrote, "Humans are unique not because they are strong, but because they are vulnerable and strong anyway. They know they can be hurt, can die, can lose everything, and they still choose to care. That is the Deathworld gift. They learned compassion in a place that tried to kill them every day. Human mercenaries became highly sought after. Not because they were cheap, but because they were effective. A human security team would die before abandoning their clients. That kind of loyalty was rare and valuable. Human engineers revolutionized safety protocols across the galaxy. They assumed disasters would happen and designed for them. Alien engineers had built for perfect conditions. Humans built for when everything went wrong. Human psychologists helped other species deal with trauma. Apparently, when you came from a world that constantly traumatized you, you developed excellent coping mechanisms. But humanity also brought challenges. They argued passionately in council sessions. They questioned authorities. They pushed boundaries. The Quarren complained constantly that humans were disruptive to proper order. Tarnvel, now retired but still influential, laughed when he heard these complaints. They are alive, he said. Let them be alive. We spent 10,000 years being orderly and peaceful. Then a crisis came and we nearly died. The humans taught us that sometimes you need to be disorderly. Sometimes you need to take risks. Sometimes you need to be willing to break the rules to do what is right. 2 years passed. Sarah Chen was now a general, commanding integrated units of humans and aliens. The soldiers under her command came from dozens of species. She trained them all in human tactics, human philosophy, human stubbornness. What is the first rule? She would ask new recruits. Never give up, they would respond. What is the second rule? Protect your squad. And the third? Acceptable losses do not mean acceptable deaths. We fight to win and come home. Dr. Webb and Dr. Amara Okonkwo ran the Galactic Institute for Xenobiology. They studied threats, developed countermeasures, and trained the next generation of scientists. Amara kept a picture of her brother on her desk. She looked at it every morning and whispered, "Still matters." Ixthari became one of the galaxy's most respected journalists. Her documentary about Sanctuary won every major award, but her proudest moment was when a young Kashari told her, "I watched your footage. I joined the Defense Forces because of it. I want to be like the humans. I want to protect others." Then the alarm sounded again. Elena was in a council session when the alert came. Another extragalactic signal. Not Ravagers. Something new. Something worse. The chamber erupted in panic. The Vryn ran probability simulations. Their conclusion was grim. This new threat made the Ravagers look like a minor problem. It would take decades to prepare an adequate defense. Counselor Zixthar turned to Elena. "Will Earth respond again?" Elena felt the weight of the question. Earth had not fully recovered from Sanctuary. The wounds were still fresh. They had given so much already. She opened a communication channel to Earth. President Chen appeared on screen. Sarah's aunt, revealed in the council records. The resemblance was striking. "Madam President," Elena said formally, "the galaxy needs us again." President Chen was silent for a moment. Behind her, Elena could see the United Earth Assembly. Representatives from every nation, all of them listening. "How bad?" President Chen asked. "Worse than the Ravagers." "Casualties?" "Unknown. Likely significant." President Chen looked at something off-screen, then back at Elena. "Ambassador, humanity has always had a choice. We could turn away. We could say we have given enough. We could let others fight." Elena felt her heart sink. Maybe Earth would say no this time. Maybe they had reached their limit. "But we will not do that," President Chen continued. Her voice was firm, "because that is not who we are. Deathworlders do not abandon family. And the galaxy is our family now. Tell the Council that humanity accepts. We will mobilize. We will fight. The alert came in the middle of the night, station time. Major Sarah Chen woke to red lights and the sound of alarms she had learned to hate. She was dressed and moving before her mind fully caught up with her body. The briefing room was already packed when she arrived. Every human officer and most of the alien command staff were there. Admiral Kowalski stood at the front, his face grim. "Sanctuary is under attack," he said simply. The room went silent. Everyone knew about Sanctuary. It was the Kashari homeworld. 20 billion people lived there. It was one of the most populated planets in the galaxy, and the Kashari were pacifists. They had no real military, just defense satellites and police forces. The tactical display showed the horror. A Ravager fleet bigger than anything seen before was approaching. Millions of the creatures, supported by dozens of the massive bioships that birthed them. The Kashari orbital defenses were already falling. "Evacuation?" someone asked. "Impossible," Zethral replied. His crystalline form was dimmed with what the humans had learned meant despair. 20 billion people cannot be evacuated in time. The Kashari have perhaps 48 hours before the Ravagers make planetfall in overwhelming numbers. "Then we defend it," Sarah said. The alien commanders looked at her like she was insane. A Quarren admiral spoke up. "Major, please understand. This is not Tertius 7th. This is not 3,000 Ravagers. Intelligence estimates show at least 3 million in the initial wave, with more spawning every hour." "The math is impossible." "The math is always impossible," Sarah replied. "That is why you called us." Admiral Kowalski studied the tactical display. The Kashari were fleeing in every ship they could launch, but most would not make it out in time. He looked at his officers. Every human in the room knew what he was thinking. "We make our stand at Sanctuary," Kowalski said. "All ships. All personnel. We buy time for the evacuations." A message came from Concordia Prime within the hour. High Command had reviewed the situation. Their conclusion was clear. Sanctuary would fall. The human fleet should focus on protecting the evacuation ships and establishing defensive positions elsewhere. Any forces that went to Sanctuary would be lost. The message ended with a simple statement: "Die well." Sarah watched Admiral Kowalski read the message aloud to the assembled fleet. Every ship's crew heard it. The silence stretched across thousands of personnel. Then from the carrier Midway came a response. Then from the Stalingrad. Then from every human ship the same message repeated: "We have not yet begun to fight." The human fleet jumped to Sanctuary. They were 50,000 strong now, reinforced over the past months. 50,000 against millions. And every single human volunteer knew they were probably not coming home. Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Midway. She was not military, but she had refused to stay behind. "If humanity is making its stand, I should be here," she had told Kowalski. He had not argued. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel to chaos. The Kashari orbital platforms were in ruins. Ravager bioships were already descending toward the planet. Evacuation vessels fled in every direction, many pursued by Ravager fighters. "All ships, defensive formation," Kowalski ordered. "Fighter wings, protect the evacuation ships. Marine transports, prepare for ground deployment." "Sir, ground deployment?" an officer questioned. "We should maintain orbital superiority." "We cannot maintain orbital superiority," Kowalski said bluntly. "Look at the numbers. But we can land forces in the major cities and refugee centers. We can turn every building into a fortress. We can teach the Kashari to fight, and we can buy time." Sarah's Marines were in the first wave down. They landed in New Harmony, Sanctuary's largest city. The Kashari there were in a panic, flooding towards spaceports that were already overwhelmed. "Listen up," Sarah told her company as they deployed. "Our mission is simple. We hold this city until every civilian who wants to leave can leave. That might be hours, might be days. We hold until we cannot hold anymore." "Understood?" "Hua!" 200 voices responded. The Kashari had never seen war. Their civilization had been peaceful for 20,000 years. Now they watched as human Marines set up defensive positions in their beautiful city. Humans turned parks into supply depots. They converted office buildings into strong points. They laid mines in the elegant boulevards and set up machine gun nests in cultural centers. An elderly Kashari teacher named Vrala approached Sarah. "Why are you destroying our city?" "We are not destroying it," Sarah replied, checking her rifle. "We are fortifying it." When the Ravagers come, they will try to push through to the spaceport. We are going to stop them. Every barricade we build, every trap we set, that is more time for your people to escape. You cannot stop millions of them. No, Sarah agreed. But we can slow them down. Sometimes that is enough. The Ravagers came on the second day. The sky went dark with bioships. They landed outside the city and began to swarm inward. Millions of them, a tide of claws and teeth and wrongness. The humans met them at the city's edge. The battle for Sanctuary lasted 7 days. 7 days that became legend across the galaxy. Ixthari was there recording everything. Her footage would later be studied in military academies and shown in schools to teach what courage really meant. The first day was confusion. The Kashari civilians were terrified. The Ravagers pushed forward in waves. But the humans held. They used every trick they had learned on Earth. They turned the city itself into a weapon. They collapsed buildings to block approaches. They flooded subway tunnels. They used the Kashari's own infrastructure against the invaders. On the third day, ammunition started running low. Sarah's Marines began rationing bullets. They used captured Ravager limbs as improvised weapons. They taught the Keshari how to reload magazines, how to operate simple firearms, how to treat wounds. Vrala, the elderly teacher, found herself in a refugee center with 10,000 civilians and 30 human Marines. The Ravagers surrounded them. Sarah's unit was down to their last ammunition. "I am sorry," Sarah told Vrala. "We promised to protect you. We are failing." Vrala looked at the exhausted, bleeding humans who had fought for 3 days without rest to protect strangers. "You are not failing. You are teaching us what courage is." The Kashari civilians who had never fought in their long history asked to help. Sarah showed them how. Together, humans and Kashari held that refugee center for 18 more hours, long enough for evacuation ships to land and take everyone to safety. On the 5th day, Dr. Marcus Webb's biological weapon was ready. A pathogen that targeted Ravager neural tissue specifically, but it needed to be delivered to the Ravager landing sites. Through controlled territory, past millions of hostiles, 50 Marines volunteered. Every single one knew it was a one-way trip. They fought through the swarm, took massive casualties, and planted the dispersal devices. 42 of them did not make it back. Among the dead was Sergeant Okonkwo. He died holding a position that allowed his squad to reach the final dispersal point. His sister, Dr. Amara Okonkwo, received the news while still working in the lab. She paused for 10 seconds. Then she went back to work. There would be time to grieve if they survived. The pathogen worked. Ravagers began dying by the thousands. But there were millions and more kept coming. On the 7th day, the evacuations were complete. 20 billion Keshari were safe. But the human fleet in orbit was shattered. More than half the ships were destroyed or crippled. Ground forces were at 40% strength. Admiral Kowalski made his final decision. The remaining human carriers would ram the Ravager bioships in orbit. It would destroy both sides, but it would disrupt the Ravager coordination long enough for the Allied fleet to arrive and finish the job. Elena tried to talk him out of it. "Admiral, humanity just earned its place in the galaxy. We do not need martyrs. We need to keep our promises," Kowalski replied. "We said we would save Sanctuary. We will." The human carriers engaged their drives. They accelerated toward the Ravager bioships. As they went, they broadcast names of the fallen, messages to families on Earth, and music. Human music. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony played across every frequency. The impacts were visible from the ground. Brilliant flashes as human ships and Ravager vessels destroyed each other in orbit. Sarah Chen stood in the ruins of New Harmony, watching the sky. Her company was down to 800 from the original 2,000. They were exhausted. Many were wounded, but they had done it. A Kashari child no more than 6 in human years approached her. "Are you an angel?" the child asked in a small voice. Sarah laughed. It came out more like a sob. "No, kid. Just a Marine. Just someone who decided that protecting you mattered more than staying safe." Vrala came to stand beside her. The elderly teacher had fought alongside the humans for 7 days. She had learned to shoot. She had learned to bandage wounds. She had learned what it meant to refuse to give up. "How do we repay this?" Vrala asked quietly.
37,000 of your people died for us."
"How do we possibly repay that debt?" Sarah looked at the survivors. Keshari and humans together, exhausted and bloody but alive. You survive. You remember? You pass it forward. When someone else needs help, you be the ones who stand. The Allied fleet arrived 3 hours later. The Ravagers, their orbital coordination destroyed and their numbers devastated by the human pathogen, were in disarray. The battle was won. The Ravagers were worse in person than on any screen. Sarah Chen had seen the footage. She had studied the tactical data. She thought she was prepared, but when the first wave came screaming out of the mining complex, even her years of combat experience could not fully suppress the primal terror that grabbed her gut. They were wrong. Everything about them was biologically wrong. They had limbs that bent at angles that should not exist. Their skin was not skin, but something between metal and flesh, rippling with bioluminescent patterns. When they moved, they made sounds that hurt to hear, clicks and screeches that seemed designed to trigger fear responses. "Contact front," someone shouted unnecessarily. Every Marine could see the wave of monsters flowing toward them like a living flood. "Hold position," Sarah ordered. "Fire on my mark." 3, 2, 1 mark. 200 rifles opened fire simultaneously. The sound was thunder. The effect was immediate and brutal. Ravagers at the front of the charge simply exploded under the concentrated kinetic fire. Their bodies came apart in sprays of black fluid that sizzled when it hit the ground, but more kept coming. "They do not stop," Corporal Rodriguez yelled. "Good!" Sarah shouted back. "Neither do we." "Second squad, grenades!" Third squad, prepare to cycle through. The battle became chaos. Not the random chaos of panic, but the organized chaos of humans doing what humans did best, adapting under pressure. When the Ravagers got close, Marines switched to shorter-range weapons. When those ran dry, they used their combat knives. When 3 Ravagers cornered Private Jenkins in a collapsed tunnel, he triggered a mining charge that buried all of them, then dug himself out 20 minutes later with a concussion and a broken arm. He refused medical evacuation. "I can still shoot, ma'am," he told Sarah. Orbiting above the planet, Commander Zethral watched the battle feeds with growing disbelief. His tactical computers were updating casualty projections constantly. Every few minutes the numbers changed. They kept going down. "This is impossible," he muttered. "The humans should be overrun by now." A Kashari officer was monitoring different feeds. "Commander, you need to see this." The screen showed a squad of Marines who had been cut off from the main force. They were surrounded by Ravagers in an old storage building. Standard procedure would be to call for extraction or make a last stand. Instead, the Marines were hurting the Ravagers, deliberately using the building's layout to funnel them into kill zones, using storage containers as improvised barriers. One Marine was up in the rafters dropping explosives on clusters below. Another had somehow started a chemical fire that was forcing Ravagers toward a section where 2 Marines with heavy weapons were waiting. "They are hunting," Zethral said slowly. "They are not defending. They are hunting." Down on the planet, Ixthari the journalist was recording everything. She had stayed at the landing zone designated as safe, but the battle had spread, and now Ravagers were trying to flank around to the dropships. A dozen Marines had been left to guard the landing zone. When the Ravagers came, Ixthari expected them to retreat to the ships and seal the doors. Instead, they advanced to meet the enemy. She watched a sergeant named Okonko charge forward with what her translator called a shotgun. He fired repeatedly into the approaching Ravagers, each shot tearing massive holes in their biomechanical bodies. When one got too close, he used the weapon like a club, smashing it aside, then shot it on the ground. "Why?" Ixthari whispered. "Why not defend from cover?" A Marine next to her, left behind with a wounded leg, heard the question. "Because if we let them get to the ships, they might damage them. Can't have that, so we stop them here. But you could die. Better us than lose our ride home," the Marine said practically. "Also, dying beats letting monsters win. We learned that a long time ago." By the 3rd hour of fighting, Dr. Marcus Webb and Dr. Amara Okonkwo had what they needed. A strike team had captured 3 Ravagers alive, stunning them with electrical charges and dragging them into reinforced containment. The mission had cost 2 Marines their lives. But as Sergeant Davis told Dr. Webb while bleeding from a nasty cut across his shoulder, "You said you needed samples. We got you samples." In the makeshift lab on the command ship, the 2 doctors worked quickly. The Ravagers were kept sedated and separated. Standard xenobiology precautions, except the human version of standard involved more radiation shielding, more chemical isolation, and more fail-safes than most species considered necessary. Their cellular structure is incredibly efficient. Marcus said, studying readouts. They can adapt to toxins within hours. No wonder conventional weapons barely slow them down. Amara was looking at different data. Marcus, look at this. Their immune response is almost non-existent. What do you mean? I mean they have no real defense against microbial threats. Their biology is optimized for physical threats, energy weapons, kinetic damage. But disease? Parasites? They are completely vulnerable. Marcus stared at the data. They evolved in an environment without competing microorganisms. Or they were engineered that way. Either way, Amara said with a grim smile, they have never met Earth bacteria. Back on Tertius 7th, Major Chen's forces had pushed deep into the mining complex. The Ravagers fought back hard, but they were learning something that terrified the alien observers. They could not predict the humans. Ravagers were efficient. They adapted to tactics within hours. They learned patterns and countered them. Against the Vrin's drone forces, this had been devastating. The Ravagers would analyze, adapt, and overcome, but humans did not follow patterns. One squad would use standard infantry tactics. The next would do something completely unexpected, like luring Ravagers into a fuel storage area and igniting it remotely. The Ravagers adapted to direct assault, so humans switched to ambushes. They adapted to ambushes, so humans went back to direct assault but from a different angle. They are too random, Commander Zethral said, frustrated. There is no consistency to their methods. Admiral Kowalski, monitoring from his flagship, smiled. That is the point, Commander. Humans are creative. We improvise. Every squad has different training, different backgrounds, different ideas. We do not fight like a machine. We fight like survivors who have learned that rigid thinking gets you killed. The turning point came when Sarah's company cornered the largest Ravager nest in the colony's main habitat dome. Intelligence said there were at least 500 Ravagers inside, including several of the larger breeder variants that produced more creatures. Standard military doctrine was clear. Orbital bombardment. Destroy the entire structure. But Sarah looked at the dome and saw something else. She saw salvageable infrastructure. She saw a chance to prove something. We are going in, she announced. Her sergeants did not question it. They just started planning. The assault was brutal. The humans pushed through the dome's maintenance tunnels, using the tight spaces to limit how many Ravagers could engage at once. They used industrial equipment as weapons, dropping ore containers on clusters of enemies. They redirected the dome's life support systems, flooding certain areas with nitrogen to slow the Ravagers down. Private Rodriguez found herself face-to-face with a breeder, a massive Ravager twice her size with too many arms. Her rifle was empty. Her sidearm was jammed. She did the only thing she could think of. She jumped on its back and started stabbing it with her combat knife. The knife barely penetrated its armored hide, but Rodriguez kept stabbing, kept moving, kept attacking. Other Marines saw and rushed to help. Together, they brought the breeder down through sheer stubborn refusal to quit. When the dome was cleared 6 hours later, the casualty reports came in. 24 Marines wounded, 3 seriously, 0 killed in this phase. The colony was retaken, 3,000 Ravagers eliminated. Human casualties, 28 total, 12% of the force. Every military analyst had predicted at least 70% losses. Commander Zethral reviewed the battle recordings in silence. Finally, he turned to Admiral Kowalski. I do not understand. By all calculations, your forces should have been destroyed. Your calculations assumed we would fight like you do, Kowalski replied. We do not. We are Deathworlders, Commander. We evolved in constant danger. Our ancestors did not have the luxury of perfect tactics or overwhelming force. They had to be creative, stubborn, and willing to take risks that would seem insane to anyone else. You send your soldiers to almost certain death. We send them to accomplish the mission. If they die knowing it mattered. That is enough. Zethral looked at the screens showing human Marines celebrating their victory on Tertius 7. They were exhausted, wounded, covered in their own blood and alien fluids, but they were laughing, joking, already talking about the next fight. They are insane, Zethral said quietly. Maybe, Kowalski agreed, but we are your insane allies, and we just proved that Ravagers can be beaten. Ixthari's report went viral across the galaxy within hours. Her footage showed the reality of human combat, brutal, efficient, and terrifyingly effective. But it also showed something else. It showed Marines pulling wounded comrades to safety under fire. It showed them sharing water and medical supplies. It showed Sergeant Okonkwo sitting with a dying Ravager specimen, not with hatred but with a strange professional respect for a defeated enemy. The alien delegates expected Earth to send a small force, maybe a few advisors, perhaps one ship to observe and offer suggestions, military consultants at most. They were not prepared for what actually arrived. 48 hours after President Chen's message, the first expeditionary fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of staging ground Kepler. 12 massive carriers, each larger than most alien warships, 40 cruisers bristling with weapons, hundreds of support craft, 20,000 Marines in drop-ready status. The fleet's arrival sent shockwaves through the Allied command. The ships had names that meant nothing to most aliens but everything to humans. The Indomitable, the Stalingrad, the Thermopylae, the Alamo. Each name carried the weight of human history, battles where humans had fought impossible odds. Major Sarah Chen stood in the briefing room of the carrier Midway, looking at her company. 200 Marines, all volunteers. They came from everywhere on Earth. Former soldiers looking for one more fight. Young people wanting to prove themselves. Engineers who had trained for combat. Even a few academics who could shoot straight. "Listen up," Sarah said. Her voice cut through the nervous chatter. "We are going to fight an enemy that has destroyed 3 civilizations. They will not surrender. They will not retreat. They will not negotiate. Does anyone have a problem with that?" Silence. Then a corporal in the back raised his hand. "Ma'am, permission to speak freely?" "Granted." Sounds like every Friday night in Australia. The room erupted in laughter. Sarah let it go for a moment, then raised her hand. "We have been called here because the galaxy thinks we are crazy enough to fight monsters that never stop. They are right. We are from Earth. We have been fighting things that want to kill us since the day our ancestors climbed down from the trees. These Ravagers, they are just another predator. And we know how to deal with predators." She pulled up the tactical displays. Images of the Ravagers filled the screens. Even her experienced Marines shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, they look scary," Sarah continued. "Good, let them be scary. We have seen scary before. We will see it again. What matters is that we know how to be scarier." A private named Jenkins spoke up. "What if we die, ma'am?" Sarah looked at him steadily. "Then we die doing something that matters. We die protecting 20 billion people who cannot protect themselves. There are worse ways to go." Jenkins nodded slowly. "Hua, ma'am." "Hua," the room echoed. Meanwhile, on the station's main deck, humanity's scientific team was setting up their equipment. Dr. Marcus Webb and Dr. Amara Okonkwo were xenobiologists, specialists in studying alien life. The station's existing science teams looked at their equipment with confusion. "Why do you have so many containment protocols?" asked a Kashari scientist. "We are studying from safe distances," Amara smiled. "On Earth, we learned a long time ago that the most dangerous things are often very small. Viruses, bacteria, parasites. We do not take chances with unknown biology. But the Ravagers are large creatures," the Kashari protested. "The parts we can see are large," Marcus corrected. "But what about their chemistry? Their microbiome? What about what they leave behind? On Earth, you can survive a bear attack and die from the infection 2 days later." The alien scientists looked disturbed by this. The concept of invisible threats was foreign to species from gentle worlds. The human fleet's arrival also brought cultural shock. The Allied command center on the station suddenly had humans walking the corridors. They laughed too loudly. They moved too quickly. They touched each other casually, something many species found aggressive. Worse, they brought their music. An incident report was filed when a maintenance crew started playing something called heavy metal while working on ship repairs. 3 Theron workers had to be treated for sensory overload. The humans apologized and turned it down, but they did not turn it off. Commander Zethral of the Vrin requested a formal inspection of the human Marines. He wanted to assess their combat readiness. Admiral James Kowalski, commander of the human fleet, agreed immediately. The inspection did not go well. Zethral stood in the Midway's main hangar, watching Marines run through combat drills. His crystalline form flickered with colors that human translators identified as deep concern and mounting horror. "These are your warriors?" he asked Admiral Kowalski. "Our finest. They wear minimal armor. Mobility is important. They carry kinetic weapons, projectile throwers. We stopped using such primitive tools 3,000 years ago. Kinetic weapons do not run out of battery. They do not get disrupted by electromagnetic fields, and they make very satisfying holes in targets. Zethral watched a Marine doing pull-ups on a bar. The human's muscles strained visibly under his skin. They are so fragile, so soft. A Ravager strike will tear them apart. Probably, Kowalski agreed calmly, but they will keep fighting anyway. That is what humans do. They will die. Everyone dies, Commander. The question is what you do before that happens. Zethral did not understand. His species fought from protected command ships, controlling drones and automated defenses. The idea of putting soft bodies directly into combat seemed insane, but the Council had asked for humans, so humans they would get. The first joint operation was planned for 3 days later. Intelligence had located a small mining colony on a planet called Tertius 7. The Ravagers had overrun it 2 weeks ago. Standard protocol was to write it off as lost. Admiral Kowalski looked at the tactical display during the command briefing. How many Ravagers are estimated? Approximately 3,000, Zethral replied. The colony had 800 workers. All are presumed consumed, so we are going to take it back. The alien commanders exchanged glances. A Kashari admiral spoke up carefully. Admiral Kowalski, perhaps you do not understand. The colony is lost. There is nothing to take back. There is ground to take back, Kowalski said firmly. There is infrastructure that can be reclaimed. There is a message to send that we do not surrender territory without a fight. The casualties would be unacceptable. Zethral protested. We calculate a 73% loss rate for ground forces. Then it is good that we are using human ground forces, Kowalski replied. We calculate differently. Major Sarah Chen's company got the assignment. 200 Marines against 3,000 Ravagers. Every military algorithm in the Allied database said it was suicide. Sarah looked at the numbers and shrugged. We have faced worse odds, she told her sergeants. Remember the resource wars, Detroit? We held a city of 10 million against armies that outnumbered us 20 to 1. We can handle this. Detroit had city infrastructure for defense. Ma'am, Sergeant Okonkwo pointed out, and Tertius 7 has mining tunnels, processing plants, and enough industrial equipment to make things very interesting. We will be fine. An embedded journalist was assigned to the operation. Her name was Ixthari, a member of a flying species called the Yix. She had requested to document the humans for the Galactic news networks. Now she stood in the dropship hangar, watching Marines check their weapons and equipment. She approached one Marine, a young woman named Rodriguez. Excuse me, are you frightened? Rodriguez looked up from loading her rifle magazines. Yes, ma'am, but you are still going? Of course. Being scared does not mean you do not do your job. Your job is to fight creatures that killed 800 miners in one day. Rodriguez smiled. It was not a happy smile. Our job is to take back what was stolen, and to show these Ravagers that humans do not run from bullies. Ixthari watched the Marines prepare. They were checking each other's equipment, tightening straps, running through communication checks. Some prayed, others sang quietly. One group was actually joking, laughing about something Ixthari's translator could not properly interpret. How can they laugh? Ixthari asked Elena Vasquez, who was observing the deployment. Because they are human, Elena replied. We learned a long time ago that humor helps. It reminds us we are alive, that we have something worth fighting for. The dropships launched an hour later. Inside, packed tight with Marines and their equipment, Sarah Chen gave the final briefing. Rules of engagement are simple. Nothing survives. No mercy, no prisoners. The Ravagers are not intelligent beings. They are biological machines. We kill every single one. We burn out their nests, and we make sure they know that humanity has arrived. And when we run out of ammunition, someone asked, then we use explosives. When we run out of explosives, we use the environment. When that runs out, we use rocks and sharp sticks if we have to. We are humans. We are creative. The dropships hit atmosphere. The descent was rough, shaking everyone in their seats. Ixthari, strapped in near the front, felt her wings trying to spread in panic. A Marine next to her noticed. First combat drop? He asked kindly. Yes, it gets easier. Well, no, it does not. But you get used to being terrified. That does not help. I know, but we are going to be okay. We are trained for this. The dropship's ramp fell open. Beyond it, Tertius 7 waited, and somewhere in the ruins of the mining colony, 3,000 Ravagers had no idea that humanity had arrived. Major Sarah Chen was the first one out. "Let's go to work," she said. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the massive doors of the Grand Convocation Hall. The chamber was huge, filled with representatives from hundreds of alien species. Some looked like floating crystals. Others had too many legs or eyes in strange places. A few were just clouds of gas contained in special suits. After 3 years working here, Elena still found it amazing, but she knew what would happen next. It always did. The whispers started immediately. Delegates leaned away from her. A few of the insect-like Theron clicked their mandibles in distress. One of the Keshari, who looked like a cross between a deer and a butterfly, actually got up and moved to a different seat. Elena kept her face calm. She was used to this. Humans were Deathworlders. Earth was classified as a Class 2 death world, one of only 3 planets known to have produced intelligent life despite being absolutely deadly. Most civilized species came from nice, safe worlds where the biggest predator was the size of a house cat, and the weather was always pleasant. Earth was different. Earth had hurricanes and earthquakes. It had lions and bears and crocodiles. It had diseases that could kill in days and plants that could poison with a touch. Humanity had evolved in a nightmare, and every species in the galaxy knew it. She took her seat in the human section. It was far from the center, in a corner usually reserved for minor species who barely got to vote. Earth had been petitioning for full council membership for 7 years now. Elena had personally made the request 7 times. 7 times denied. High Counselor Tarnvel called the session to order. He was Keshari, one of the oldest delegates with silver fur and kind eyes. He was also one of the few who treated Elena with respect. "We begin with the human petition for council membership," Tarnvel said. Elena stood. She had prepared a speech. She had data showing human achievements, evidence of Earth's peaceful intentions, testimonials from the few species willing to work with them. She opened her mouth to begin. Then the alarm screamed. Red lights flooded the chamber. The massive view screens flickered to life, showing static and chaos. Elena's translator earpiece crackled as hundreds of species started shouting at once. Silence. Tarnvel's voice boomed through the speakers. "Emergency protocols. Clear the channel." The main screen stabilized. A Vryn commander appeared. The Vryn were crystalline beings, beautiful and terrifying. They controlled the largest fleet in the galaxy. They had never lost a war. The commander looked shattered. Literally, cracks ran through his crystal body. "The Vryn Collective requests immediate council intervention," he said. His voice was hollow. "We are in full retreat. 40 systems have fallen in 3 months. Our armada cannot stop them. Nothing stops them." The chamber exploded into chaos again. The Vryn were the strongest military power in the galaxy. If they were running, what is this threat? Tarnvel demanded. The screen split. One side showed the cracked commander. The other showed horror. Elena had seen many things in her life. She had watched nature documentaries about Earth's deadliest predators. She had served in the resource wars before becoming a diplomat. She thought she knew what scary looked like. She was wrong. The creatures on screen were wrong in every way. They looked organic but moved like machines. They had too many limbs that bent in too many directions. Their ships were not built but grown, pulsing like diseased organs. Worst of all, wherever they went, they consumed. Planets were stripped to bare rock. Ships were torn apart and absorbed. Even the bodies of fallen defenders were dragged away to be processed into more monsters. "We call them Ravagers," the Vryn commander said. "They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They only consume and reproduce. 3 civilizations have been completely destroyed. The Vryn Collective will fall within 1 year unless something changes." The silence in the chamber was absolute. Species that had bickered for centuries sat frozen in terror. Then Counselor Zixthar of the Vryn spoke. He was famous as a military genius, the architect of their greatest victories. "We have analyzed the data from every battle," Zixthar said slowly. "We have run 10,000 simulations. With conventional warfare, the galaxy will fall. The Ravagers adapt faster than we do. They reproduce faster. They have no fear, no hesitation, no mercy." "Then what do you propose?" asked a delegate from the peaceful Quarren. Zixthar looked directly at Elena. His crystalline eyes were unreadable, but something in his posture made her straighten in her seat. "We reviewed the databases we have on all species, including those not in the council. We looked for anything, any trait or history that might help. He paused. We found something in the human records. Every eye in the chamber turned to Elena. She felt her heart start to pound. Humans wage war like nothing else in the known galaxy, Zixthar continued. Their history is one long catalog of conflict. But more than that, they fight like they evolved on a death world. They are survivors. They adapt. They endure injuries that would kill most species. And they have experience with threats that never stop, never negotiate, and never show mercy. He pulled up images. Elena recognized them instantly. Wolves hunting in packs, army ants consuming everything in their path, viruses spreading through populations. Humans had faced countless enemies on Earth that behaved exactly like the Ravagers. I propose we invoke the Accord of Last Resort, Zixthar said. We asked the humans for military assistance. The chamber exploded. Half the delegates shouted in support. The other half screamed in horror. You want to bring Deathworlders into this? Shrieked the Quarren delegate. They are as dangerous as the Ravagers. They are soldiers, Zixthar replied coldly. We need soldiers. We have tacticians and strategists. We have technology and resources. What we do not have are warriors who understand how to fight an enemy that will not stop until one side is extinct. The humans do. Tarnville raised his hand for silence. It took several minutes. This is unprecedented, the High Counselor said. The Accord has never been invoked for a non-member species. These are unprecedented circumstances, Zixthar replied. Elena stood. Her voice was steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. The High Council has spent years telling Earth that we are too violent, too aggressive, too dangerous for civilized company. Now you want us to be violent for you? Tarnville met her eyes. She saw regret there and shame and desperate hope. Yes, he said simply. We are asking. Will humanity help? Elena thought about Earth. She thought about the billions of humans who had been rejected and isolated by the galaxy. She thought about what her government would say when she brought back this request. I need to transmit this to Earth, she said. We cannot answer without consulting our people. You have 1 week, Tarnville said. The Ravagers will not wait longer. The vote took 3 hours. In the end, it passed by a narrow margin. The message went out to Earth through the quantum relay. Elena sat in her quarters that night staring at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Ravagers were coming, and humanity, the species the galaxy feared and rejected, was being asked to save it. Her communicator chimed. The response from Earth had arrived impossibly fast. She opened it. President Chen appeared on screen, standing before the United Earth Assembly. The massive chamber behind her was packed with representatives from every nation on Earth. Ambassador Vasquez, President Chen said, your message has been received and reviewed. The Assembly has voted. Elena held her breath. Tell the Council that humanity accepts, President Chen said. Her voice was firm. We will mobilize the fleet. If the galaxy is calling for help, Deathworlders will answer. The screen went dark. Elena sat in silence for a long moment. Then she smiled. The galaxy was about to learn what humans really were, and they would never forget.